This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The opinions on this program are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WPSL. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. Legal questions? Ask a lawyer. Give us a call at 340-1590, 340-1590 here at the studios of WPSL. And Ask a Lawyer with your host, attorney Stuart M. Address.
Good morning, Treasure Coast. This is Stuart Address, and it's Ask a Lawyer. And we're going to take your questions to the extent you have some. I hope you do. And I will try to give you some brief free legal advice and maybe guide you in the right direction. We'll also talk about a couple of issues. I have a little war story to talk about that deals with some of the topics we've been talking about recently. And of course, we are now completing, at least here in St. Lucie County, 2 weeks of school. So for you parents out there, are you ready for the weekend? I know I am. I don't know about you, but waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get my kid to the bus at 6 is not fun. I think I should sue somebody. If you know who I should sue, give me a call. Help me out.
That's funny because when my daughter was going to high school, it was the same way, very, very early in the morning. And she'd come back with like grades that weren't so hot. And I'd be like, why are we getting up so early? You might as well stay home.
Well,
either do a good job while you're there, or we might as well just sleep in.
Might as well sleep in or get homeschooled or something, but I don't want them home all day. Happy to get them off to school, but I'm not so happy about the time.
Yeah. If you get up that early, you might as well do a good job while you're there.
Yeah. All right. So we've been talking over the last several weeks about defamation. We've been talking about discrimination, civil rights violations, and often I've had this question posed to me, and I actually had it posed to me earlier in the week, and I thought, gee, wouldn't that be an interesting thing to talk about this week? And the question is, what is the most unusual set of facts that you've received when somebody called into your office with a possible case?
Okay. So you went, wow, that's intriguing.
That's intriguing because what really happens, to be honest with all of you, is when you first call the office and you tell us the basic facts, most of them are fairly, run-of-the-mill. I mean, they're personal to you, but we've sort of heard the fact patterns before. And we start evaluating from the onset, from the information you're giving, as to who do we think may be responsible? Do you have a claim? How provable is the claim? Even if you can prove your claim, are there damages that are recoverable? And you're going through that process, almost instantaneously, and you evolve that process, as you get more and more facts, or if the person becomes a client, as you learn more and more information, and even all the way up to a trial. You're constantly evolving, your impression of the case and the facts. So the problem comes in when somebody calls up with a set of facts that are not only complicated, but extreme. So extreme that the initial reaction is, I don't know if I even believe that.
Okay.
Now, they say truth is stranger than fiction. And so over the course of 33 years, I have learned that there are many truths that come into the office that are quite strange and unbelievable at first.
So you say it has to be real because who could make that up?
Well, no, sometimes it is made up. But the real point is when you hear these extreme things, your initial reaction is that couldn't have happened. And so the red flags go up, and you really start wondering whether or not this is real. I'll be honest with you folks, whether or not the person may have a screw loose, okay? But the truth is, too many times to be coincidental, these crazy facts are real. They happened. And it's just your instinct to say, oh, that can't happen is because it shouldn't happen. But it does happen. So what's the craziest one? Okay. This was actually before I started my own solo practice. This was with my last firm. We got a call by an African-American couple, husband and wife, that told us they were up in the Panhandle and going to visit family. It was either a Memorial Day picnic or a July 4th picnic, something like that. It was a holiday picnic. And they were from they were a little further south than us, somewhere in Palm Beach County. And they had driven up to the Panhandle to go visit family. And they were pulled over as soon as they got into this little town, and I honestly don't even remember the name of it. I wouldn't tell you if I did, but I don't remember the name of it. And all of a sudden they're pulled over.
Don't speed in Pahokee.
Right, exactly. And all of a sudden they're pulled over, and the husband and the father who was driving, I mean, he knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He knew he was not exceeding the speed limit on this very small, country road. Mm-hmm. And it was daylight. So he's pulled over, and I guess up there, the police, they wear these really fancy hats. Sort of like the old day sheriffs. And so this officer approaches, the standard license, registration, etc. And what happens then becomes something of, I don't know, out of the books of improbability. I don't know how to describe it. He is asked to exit the vehicle. The officer asks whether he can search, knowing that there's nothing in the car. He says yes. Nothing's found. Mm-hmm. And the officer, during this morning pullover, lets him go, but with an admonition. And the admonition wasn't, be careful, be safe. It was, you're lucky I didn't find anything. They asked him where he was going, obviously, and he explained, mm-hmm. He was going to visit family and where exactly the family lived. So the officer had that information. And the officer says, you're lucky I didn't find anything because your family is lucky to have that piece of property because my great-great-grandfather owned your great-great-grandfather. Like, wow. Okay. Did the officer really say something like that? Well, later on we had to investigate whether we could find evidence that something like that might have been said, and you might wonder how we did that, but I'll get to that a little bit later. And so they go on their merry way and to meet their family. And the family asks them to go to the local shopping center to pick up, assorted extra items for the barbecue, including, I don't know, some kind of meat. So they go, I don't know if it's Publix up there or what have you, Happy Hog, who knows?
Who knows, yeah. Piggly Wiggly.
Piggly Wiggly. Maybe it was Piggly Wiggly. And so, again, as soon as they enter back into this little town, the same officer pulls them over.
Goodness.
But now it's getting, because the barbecue is an evening barbecue, now it's getting a little bit near dusk. It's not quite dark, but it's not quite light yet, or still. So they're pulled over, and again, license, registration, a standard routine. And he's asked to exit the vehicle, and, may I search? And again, he says, sure, go ahead, search, what the heck. This time he has one of those police dogs. And the dog is alerting to the trunk. So he asks if he can inspect the trunk or search the trunk, and he says, yeah, sure, whatever. He opens the trunk. Well, there had been a lot of meat in there. So there were remnants, I guess, of, blood. And that's the truth, by the way. And so the dog's going crazy.
Dog thought there was a body in the trunk.
The dog's going crazy, so the officer calls for backup. And 2, 3, I don't know, maybe even 4 more cars show up, probably the whole police department, given where it was. And they take the father in one area, or an officer or two, to talk to him. They ask the wife and the mother to get out of the vehicle, and somebody takes her to another area.
Mm-hmm.
Then they ask the two kids that were in the back seat to get out of the vehicle. Now, the kids are early teens, boy and a girl. So they get out of the vehicle, and for whatever reason, they take the teen girl across the road. Father and mother is objecting to it. Of course, you know what they're told. Be quiet or we'll arrest you. They do finally allow the mother to go with the daughter across the road. It's all male officers. The dog is also alerting, or has alerted, to the girl. I don't want to get too descriptive, but they decide they want to search the girl. Now, proper procedure would be to call either the department, if they have one, or the next town, and get a female officer to come search the teenage girl. And to do it in a location that is private, not the side of the road. Well, they don't call for a female officer. They have a male officer insist that she pull down her pants and her underwear, 15 years old, I believe, to be searched. And the mother is complaining. And the mother is trying to explain now to the officer that it's that time of the month. Maybe that's why the dog was alerting. They don't care. They're not listening. So they don't find anything. So she's allowed to, get dressed again. And ultimately, the entire family is allowed to get back in the car after an hour and a half. And they're late for the barbecue, obviously. And so everything still goes, the night goes on, and now they sleep over. And now they're getting ready to leave, and they're now on their way out of town. And they're pulled over yet again. Same officer. This time, the father and the husband is arrested. What is he arrested for? Trafficking in narcotics. What? They never found anything in any of these searches. He doesn't have anything on him. How is he arrested for trafficking in narcotics? Well, a confidential informant had sworn an affidavit that when they went to, let's just call it the Piggly Wiggly, he had offered to sell him some quantity of coke, and that a sale was made. Okay, so you got a sworn statement of a confidential informant, and they wait for him to leave the house that they know he's at, and now he's arrested. And he tells his family to drive on home as fast as you can get home. Get back to South Florida quickly. We don't want to be here anymore. Get me a lawyer, and I'll take care of myself, and you get out of here. And the family leaves. It turns out when the case comes to us, he's still charged. He's on bail now. And the family comes to us with this story. And we're listening. It's a very odd story. And he says this charge is, bogus, and they want to file a civil rights action. And the problem with that very often is, well, if you file the civil rights action now, while the criminal charges are pending, you may give them more incentive to go after you, as opposed to this, if the state attorney may eventually drop the charges, but sometimes they don't want to drop the charges if they know a civil rights action is pending. If they don't think you're suing them, sometimes they're more willing to drop the charges. So he tells us about this, and we do some investigation now to try to figure out, is this crazy, convoluted, improbable story, did it really happen? Because if it did happen, it's a massive civil rights violation of the entire family. So first thing we do is we do a public records request, and we get the information about the confidential informant. Now, we don't get his identity, of course, But we find out that he's the brother of another officer on the force. A little suspicious, I think.
It's a small town.
Yeah, a little suspicious, right. Yeah.
Small town.
That's the confidential informant they ended up getting. And that's the only evidence they have. And then we sent a paralegal all the way up to the Panhandle to go to the little town library to do some genealogical research. We wanted her to find out, can you verify that this officer's great-great-grandfather owned this family's great-great-grandfather or grandparents? And why is that important? Because if it's true, then it's much more likely the officer actually said it. Because how would the family have known that?
Well, how would the officer even know that? I mean, that is
because it used to be his father's land, his great-great-grandfather's land. And when the slaves were freed or what have you, that little house in back of the main house was given to them.
But couldn't they have just bought it? I mean...
But that's not the way it happened.
Okay. You know, they could have bought it 2 years ago.
So she's doing this genealogical research, and the librarian is becoming a little suspicious of all the questions she's asking. Small town, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't do that very often, right?
And
probably don't do much very often.
Next thing you know, an officer comes to the library to ask the paralegal questions. What are you doing? Why are you here? Who are you here for?
It's the library.
So paralegal called us, told us all this. We said, okay, get out of Dodge. Okay, stop what you're doing. Get out. Come back home. Okay? It seems like it may be too dangerous there. Something funny's going on. Okay. So we filed a civil rights action. Eventually, the state attorney dropped the criminal charges. But what do you think they wanted in exchange?
For you to drop anything against them.
That's
any
right.
Charges against them.
That's right. And so we talked to the husband and the father and said, do you want to do this? He said, nope. I said, you realize if we tell them nope, they may not actually drop the charges, and you may have to face this, go to trial on this. He says,
you would think that he would just not ever want to go there again.
He never did. He never ever did.
With them.
But he was absolutely incensed, not only at what happened to him, really, what happened to his daughter.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Nope, that's not the deal I'm willing to make. And so we refused, and of course the state attorney dropped the charges anyway, because they had no case. They were just trying to get the extra little bonus of not having a civil suit. So a couple of years go by. The case actually goes to trial, federal court, up in Northern District of Florida. And we win. $1 million. Big case. Big fee. Couple morals from that story. Number one, don't turn down a client just because it's a crazy story. Make sure you really listen, because somewhere in there may be, something very real and very bad, because it happens, unfortunately. Other moral is,
what kind of town has more than one officer that'll go along with something like that?
Well, it was a police.
I mean, what kind of town?
It was a police force of like 6 officers, chief of police and 5 other officers.
Yeah.
Or something. And so
they obviously got each other's back.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And it took discovery and depositions and
then all of a sudden they wanted everybody to go away.
Right. And when it didn't happen and the settlement offers were I guess, I don't really even remember, but they were nowhere near sufficient, so the case actually went to a trial. And, they had to go back up there. And the kids went back up there.
But then you hope that the judge in that town isn't the guy's uncle.
You do. Well, you do. But you got to remember now, it's a federal judge.
Okay.
It's not a state court judge. If state court judge, I'd really have been nervous. But it's a federal judge. And, there are some federal judges who are not so great. But I really do believe in my heart that 95%, if not more, of federal judges try to do the right thing. They may have a philosophy that's different than mine that leads them to a different conclusion. They may view the facts or the law differently than I do. But I do believe that they mostly try to do the right thing. And I've had enough experiences in state and federal court where motions or what have you have not gone my way, or even the client's way, and the client was there. And the reaction, let's just put it from when the clients were there, you would expect the client to be very angry. Very often I've had a very calm reaction where it's, no, they heard everything you had to say. The judge asked a lot of questions. Judge really seemed to try to understand what was going on. And it didn't go our way, but at least we had a fair hearing. I give those clients credit to listen to that, to have something not go their way, and to still look at it and say it was a fair hearing. You know, instinctively, you know, I've been in hearings, even more so in state court, where clients aren't there. It's the judge, it's the two attorneys, you know, the court reporter, if there is one, the bailiff, and the court clerk, and that's all you got there. There's nobody to posture in front of, no camera to try to impress. And I could tell something's not going my way, so I'm going to do everything I can to try to reverse the tide. But at the end, I walk out of the courthouse, I've lost a hearing, you know, whether it's a motion to compel or whether it's even more significant. There's sometimes I get in the car and I start to debrief myself. What happened? What went wrong? Is there something that could be fixed? Is it too late? And very many times I've had to say to myself, nothing went wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You wouldn't change anything if you had to argue this hearing over again. The judge really listened, asked the right questions, just looked at it from a different perspective. And if that's the way it ends, then there's nothing wrong just because you lost. It doesn't feel good, but there's nothing wrong.
I guess that happens every time there's a case. Someone wins, someone loses.
Yes, but sometimes you can be really upset that you lost because things have occurred that you don't think should have occurred, and you don't think the judge should have allowed to occur, or you don't think the judge really gave a fair hearing on, and that's when you get really aggravated. But a lot of the time, a good amount of the time, there are a lot of good judges out there, is my point. So anyway.
And it is their interpretation of the case and of the law. They apply the law to what they're hearing.
That is correct. And when you're dealing not with a trial, which, you know, most of the times is resolved by a jury, but when you're dealing with pretrial material and it's a judge, I could come in with 5 cases that support my position. My adversary comes in with 5 cases that say the exact opposite. And there are probably another 20 cases out there that say varying forms of both of them. So it really does come down to interpretation. And you could say, how could there be 5 cases that say one thing and 5 cases that say the exact opposite? Because the fact pattern in each case was slightly different. And so it is applying the law to the facts. And in, let's say, the case I'm in front of the judge is trying to apply these particular facts into the law as it's been interpreted. Doesn't always agree with the way I look at it. Or if I'm asking for certain documents, you know, I want 5 years of tax returns. Sometimes I get 2 years. Mr. Adris, there's no need to go back 5 years. Well, Judge, there really is a need, and here's why there's a need, and here's exactly what we're looking for, and we're only going to find it if we get a reasonable scope of time to go back for documents. Sorry, no, I'm limiting it. Okay, you know, you do the best you can. That's the way it works. But that was probably the craziest fact pattern that I've ever received because, you know, I had an African-American couple pulled over several times. I had a 15-year-old girl strip searched on the side of the road by a male officer with her mother present and cars driving by on the other side. And when you first heard it, it just did not sound credible. but it was horribly, horribly true.
But they had the whole story.
They did. And although we never did exactly tie up that officer's great, whatever, we never really tied it, because he ended up talking to his family about it. And the family started going back as to how they got the land and who they got the land from. And it looked like there may have been something there, but we were never really able to figure it out completely, which was frustrating. But that is why when you call Cheryl at my office, 781-8003, she will listen with an open ear and ask you questions. And when I end up talking to you, when it gets there, I will as well, because sometimes what you have to tell us, which sounds improbable, is very true. And you don't get to that truth unless you're open to listening and starting out with the premise that the person calling you is telling you the truth. And it's not always the case, but you got to start there. So that was the great civil rights case that led to $1 million jury verdict, and then the family decided we're getting the heck out of Florida too, and they moved up to either Georgia or North Carolina, or they just left the state at that point. Wanted to have nothing to do with Florida anymore, even though they had a wonderful life and no problems, down in Palm Beach or Broward counties where they were from. But after this experience, get out of the state is what they felt, and they left. And I guess that's a shame. So, if you have calls, give us a call. It's 340-1590. I'm told that sometimes my stories are mesmerizing. I don't know if that's really true. Maybe I put you all to sleep. But give us a call. And, since we are sort of halfway through, instead of going into the smorgasbord of typical calls to my office, I want to try something to wake anybody up who I might have put to sleep. And that again goes back into the current event news without advocating a position, okay? But there is a question which keeps coming up on all the news outlets, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. They're all asking the same question and getting people with knowledge to opine as to their opinions, some of which I find very interesting and educational. One of which is a person on CNN who is a professor at my old law school. So I really like listening to him. Don't always agree with him. I listened to Professor Dershowitz yesterday from Harvard, who I always admired, and now I find I just can't agree with on anything that's going on right now. I don't understand why. And he is the scholar on constitutional law.
Do you think that he's being fair?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he is.
I absolutely. I think he's giving his
I
interpretation
think
of a number
that
of things. And
Alan Dershowitz can't do anything but be fair.
And he is very liberal,
But
he has taught constitutional law at Harvard. I don't know if he still does or if this is now his retirement gig. But he's taught constitutional law at Harvard for decades.
So he's the constitutional law guru, basically.
He is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
One of the constitutional law textbooks at my law school was Alan Dershowitz. So it's he's a good person to go to, even though I don't agree with anything he's saying right now. And that's interesting in and of itself. So what's the issue I'm talking about? High crimes and misdemeanors. What the heck are they? Everybody seems to be talking about it now. Nobody seems to agree. There are some people who are giving some very interesting educational information on TV.
Now, I just want to point this out as far as news is concerned. If you're watching a cable news channel that does nothing but news, they take a topic and they beat it to
until the next
death.
news issue comes up, which in the current administration is 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
Do we have a call?
We do.
We do. That's wonderful. All right, Richard, how are you?
Okay, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How can I help you?
I have a question.
Sure.
I moved down to Fort Pierce about 2.5 years ago, And a year and a half or so, my brother moved down, and he sold his house up in New Jersey.
Oh, that's where I'm from.
And yeah.
What
and
exit? That's a Jersey joke, folks.
Yes.
Go on, I'm sorry.
So his real estate person told him that her son moved out of New Jersey, and 3 years later, New Jersey sent him a bill in the mail, or her son a bill in the mail saying that they were charging the guy an exit tax.
An exit tax?
Yeah, an exit
For
tax.
leaving the
Yeah.
state?
I've never heard of any such thing.
Yeah, and
Think it's a
So
scam?
how can they make you pay something? Can they make you pay
Are,
something like that?
are you certain? I mean, has anybody looked at it? Are you certain that it was really an actual governmental document?
That's what his real estate person told him. That they sent him a letter, whatever state he moved
Is
to.
it possible that it had something to do with a tax associated with the sale of real property in the state?
No, they said it was an exit tax because from moving out of the state.
Well, I'll tell you, in answering your question, I'll tell you a very short story of what happened in Florida. So that doesn't sound to be possible.
That's what I thought.
It actually sounds unconstitutional, and here's why I say that. When I moved to Florida in '93, and I went to register my vehicle, they charged me an extra $450 because I was registering it from out of state.
Yeah, they got me for that.
Okay, now,
$300.
Yeah.
well, you probably by now you should have been repaid.
Yes, that money
All right,
came back.
and when they did that, of course, I wasn't going to stand up in DMV and start yelling and screaming that's unconstitutional. I paid the dang money, and I thought to myself, you can't do that.
You weren't getting a tag or registration without paying for it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no.
And I paid the money, but I said to myself, I know that's not constitutional. You cannot, punish somebody for coming into your state or leaving your state. And lo and behold, somebody filed a class action lawsuit against the state of Florida, arguing that that fee was an unconstitutional imposition of a tax that interfered with the ability of American citizens to travel freely from one state to another.
And it was really pricey too.
Yes, it
That's
was.
That's a big tax.
And I don't remember whether it went up to the Florida Supreme Court. I think it did, actually. And it was ordered that $450 fee be returned to everybody who had to pay it. And I got mine back. So
How long ago was that?
this was 90.
Early 90s.
I moved here in
Yeah.
'93. I don't know when the matter actually got to the Florida Supreme
Yeah, 'cause
Court.
we had in-laws. My in-laws came to Florida and they gave us their car. Well, when we went to go switch out of their name and into our name, yeah, we got hit too, and that
Right.
would have been like 92. Yeah.
All right, so probably I'm going to guess around sometime in the mid to late '90s, it probably got resolved by the Florida Supreme Court.
Well, they're still doing it because they got me and they got my brother.
Well, they're
Well,
not.
no, you're saying Jersey taxed you?
No, Florida.
Florida charged you what? I mean, I know they don't charge that anymore. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, because that
It
money
was
came back.
It was over $300 because my car was out of state.
Are you sure there was a separate fee for it being out of state?
Yeah, that's what they told me.
Because sometimes there is a fee for initial registration.
And then the
No,
tag.
it was because it was an out-of-state car. They said they charged me more
Well,
money
that's
than-
really interesting. It's the first time I've actually heard that in, I guess, a couple
Since
decades.
the early 90s. Yeah.
So, like I just finished with my story, that doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah.
If it is true, I think you should call a
Look
lawyer. Quite
Maybe
seriously.
Maybe I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, because if
Yeah,
that's
that's what
really
they
what it was, that's not legal.
They told me because it was an out-of-state car that charged me all that money. That's what they told me.
Well, again, that's something us lawyers say. Well, we'd have to look at it and see what it really says and interpret it. But you know,
Yeah.
I do remember exactly what happened when I moved to Florida, and it's sort of it's in line with what you were saying about this exit tax from New Jersey, and that exit tax doesn't make any sense. And I've just been handed a bulletin, and the bulletin is New Jersey exit tax. I have great researchers here at this station. WPSL is second to none in crackpot research. All right, let's see where this is from. This is from an attorney in New Jersey in a town I'm familiar with from when I lived there, Medford. And it's titled New Jersey Exit Tax. And let me just take a quick look here. It has to do with real estate. And it says, "I misunderstood issue is the so-called exit tax. Whatever you have heard is probably wrong. The fact is it's not even a tax." Very interesting. Now let's see what it is. Our esteemed former governor, Jim McGreevey, who I recall, came up with the scheme.
Yeah, I recall him too.
All right. A concern where people were making a lot of money when they sold their properties and then they moved out of state. Because, yes, people were tired of being taxed to death in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And they were not reporting their capital gains and not paying their capital gains tax to the state of New Jersey, because New Jersey has separate taxes. You folks in Florida are probably unfamiliar with this concept. There are states that tax you too. And hey, let me tell you, if you live in New York City, you get taxed by the city, the state, and the United States. All right, but going back to this, so the plan was to add another tax when they moved out of state. That's why they called it the exit tax. The so-called exit tax is 2% of the gross sales price without regard to whether there's a capital gain or not, okay? So even if you lost money on the sale, you still have to pay 2%. This forces the seller moving out of state to file a New Jersey tax return for the year. If you lost money on the deal, you get your money back, but you file a tax return, which means that if you earn money there, you've been made to file the taxes and pay the taxes. If there is a capital gain to pay, it would be deducted from the estimated tax payment, and the rest would be refunded to you. No need to panic. And he's citing a particular form, which I won't do on the radio. You'll see that the fact that the estimated tax payment form that you would likely have to file. All right. So, in other words, if it has been your primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years, it was not used for rental or business purposes, and you've not used the homestead capital gain exemption in the last 5 years, the fee is charged to you. Well, that's very interesting. I'm still not exactly sure why it's not a tax, but this lawyer says there's a whole explanation here that is much too long to go into on the radio show. But apparently what you're being told about this exit tax is absolutely called and known by people as an exit tax. But at least according to this New Jersey attorney, it's not really a tax, it's a fee that has to do with the sale of real estate. So that sort of, I think, more or less resolves the issue, because an exit tax would absolutely be unconstitutional. It interferes with your right to travel between the states, and that's a constitutional right.
Yeah.
Hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah. He told me that a while back, and I just thought, geez, that can't be right.
Well,
okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so we were talking...
Now, do they send you a bill, or is that just part of closing?
No, it looks like they send you a bill, and that way you're forced to file a tax return for that year.
Okay.
Nice way to make you file a tax return. Get your money back, you know. All right, so we were talking, and we probably won't finish this, and I was hoping we'd get to this earlier, and lots of people would call and yell and scream. But let me give you a little taste of this high crimes and misdemeanors. And I got a few sources that I pulled up, as my crack researcher said, on Google. I try to get to the good sources, though, not the, Bill's site of happiness and glory. Anyway, talking about high crimes and misdemeanors, and this came out of, obviously, good old jolly England. And that's where our framers came up with it. And in old England, going back to the 1300s, the phrase high crimes and misdemeanors had its own distinct meaning. It wasn't felonies and misdemeanors like we look at it in criminal law here. It was a separate concept. And it was instead a unique legal term that had to do with the use by public officials and misappropriation of the public trust. And I think we're going to be deterred again, so maybe we'll end up doing this topic next week, because we do have a call, which I'd much rather take. And we have Bill on line 2. How can I help you, Bill?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. You?
Good. I'm doing fine. Thank you. I do have a comment to make as far as this moving out of state.
Sure.
Our daughter and son-in-law are from San Diego, California, and they have, I don't know what kind of tax, an impact fee or something. He works, he's an engineer for the aeronautics division out there at Grumman Aerospace. Anyway, they were going to be moving, and when they found out what it was going to cost, of course, they own their home. They're going to sell their home and buy less home because when they retire, they wanted to move to Florida.
Right.
Well, they found that if they sell their home and replace it with another home that costs less, they're going to pay a redistribution fee like I'm using that term. I'm probably using the wrong word.
It sounds like a capital gains tax.
Well, I don't know. See, they are very highly taxed out there. They just, I don't know whether you follow Fox News or not, but I get them on my phone. And see, back in 2014, they increased the state income tax out there by 17%. And then they just raised the taxes on gasoline by 14 cents a gallon.
Right, and New Jersey is historic for doing that as well.
And anyway, the point is when they leave, which they want to retire back here, he wants to retire back here in Florida in the Stewart area. When they leave out there, there is some type of exit fee, something that is going to involve when they sell. Anyway, so he didn't take the promotion and
I would have to recommend that. I guess he didn't take the promotion, so it's past tense. But if they want to move to Florida at some point,
How do they know they're leaving the state? That's my question. How do they know they're not just moving into a smaller apartment?
It sounds like a real estate tax again of some type. And if it's not a tax, if it's a capital gains issue, then there may be a misunderstanding going on. Of course, I don't have all the facts, so I don't know if this is true. But let's say you're selling a $200,000 home, and you're going to buy a $100,000 home. Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry. Let me step back, as attorneys often have to do because we misstate. You're selling a home for $200,000 that you paid $100,000 for. You have a $100,000 capital gain.
Okay.
Now, one would think that you're going to be taxed on that, and that's going to interfere with your ability to buy another home, even a smaller one. But the truth is, and I don't know the exact amount because I'm not a real estate attorney, and I don't play one on TV, but there is now, and has been for quite some time, a capital gains exclusion on real estate sales up to a certain amount. Perhaps I think it's like $200,000 everybody could use in their lifetime, where they don't have to pay capital gains when they sell a home that they get more money than they paid. And also, if you then buy a home, depending upon its price, that factors into whether or not you have a capital gain as well. So I'm wondering whether it has to do more with that than it does with a so-called exit tax. And
right. Well, they our kids, I only know their story and what happened. They've been out there, I think it's 10 years, and till he retires, it's going to be another 4 years before they would, consider moving back to Florida or not, which is what their goal is when he retires. But there's something about that there is, and I'm not going to use the word exit fee, but for leaving the state of California, there is a penalty or
there should not be. Honestly, there should not be. I would have to believe that any such fee, if it's truly a penalty for leaving the state or coming into a state, is unconstitutional the same way as what happened with Florida with the motor vehicle tax was. And I would recommend that they really talk to an attorney so that they don't decide to stay in California just for that reason. Nothing wrong with California, but if they want to leave, they're free. They should be free to leave.
That's a lot wrong.
Anyway, go ahead.
Right. No, they should be free to leave, and I think they should probably talk to a lawyer or a realtor or two, and they may be able to get the answer, because lawyers can be expensive.
Right.
But I have to tell you, from everything I know, all my experience, the idea of a true penalty, a fee, a tax for leaving or entering a state within the United States is unconstitutional.
Okay.
Okay? So I hope that helped.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not help. It's more a question than a comment. Was all. Well, you kids have a great weekend. You've been very kind to take the call.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your listening.
Indeed. Bye now.
And I think we have Warren on line 1, if he is still there.
Yes, I am.
How are you, Warren?
I'm all right. I'm a little confused here, though. But
I'm confused a lot of times.
all right. Back in January 1st, I bought a boat, and the man was really nice about doing the paperwork at the tax collector, and he put a lien on the boat until I paid him for it. Well, now the boat's been paid for 3 months, paid up in full. I have all the receipts to prove it, and I'm trying to get him to go back to the tax collector with me so I can get a clean, clear title.
Oh, yes. I've heard this story before.
All right, now he keeps telling me, I'm too busy, I don't have time, I'm this, I'm working.
Maybe he don't have it.
I don't have time for this now. So how do I go about, I'm going to help him find time. I'm going to take him to court.
Okay. Well, you may not have to go that far. You may not have to go that far.
Okay.
Hopefully you don't. Because I have had the same situation 3 times before. Really.
Okay.
Now, once it turned out that the boat was sold by somebody who didn't own the boat. And that's why he didn't want to go and release the lien.
Because he doesn't have the title.
He doesn't have the title. Do you know for certain that the person who sold you the boat owned the boat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a title. He had a title and everything, and it was all legitimate.
All right.
I checked the ID numbers and everything, because I've been burnt before, too. So
then it's probably more of a situation, which where the other 2 were, where the person has now got his money, and you're just not important to him anymore, and doing something that is as menial as paperwork that requires a little bit of his time is just not very high on his life's priority list.
Right.
And sometimes that can be rectified with 1 lawyer letter.
Okay.
Sometimes the guy gets a letter from a lawyer letterhead, saying, we're going to sue you unless you arrange to have that lien transferred, or the title transferred and the lien cleared. And in the 2 other times that the person didn't really own the boat, that lawyer letter has worked.
Okay.
You should. I mean, I would hope that you would never have to go to court over something like this, because if you did, and you won, then the only question is the guy collectible for the money that you're going to win, because you're going to win.
Well, yeah, he's got money. I mean, it's not about whether he's broke or not.
Right.
And even for me, it's really not money that I'm wanting. I just want a clean, clear title for the boat.
So let me give you a suggestion. Before you go to a lawyer and even have to pay, a small fee to do something that you should be able to get done for free, I would send him a good old certified letter, return receipt, saying that he's in breach of the contract, he's failing to deliver the title to you, that if he does not make time within the next, you put it down, 10 days, 14 days, 30 days, whatever, that you intend to initiate legal action against him. Sometimes that simple letter, and it could be simple. All it has to do is say something like that.
Right.
Getting that letter, even if it's from you and not from a lawyer, it's now in writing, it's of record, it's certified, so it's going to be admissible in court. Sometimes that's enough to say, oh, gee, I better make a little time for this guy. He's just gone up a little bit higher on my priority list in life.
Yeah, there you go.
And if that doesn't work, then, whether it's me or somebody else, or you have a lawyer somewhere distant in the family who will write you a letter, a letter from a lawyer may very well solve the problem.
That sounds like a great idea.
All right, I wish you the best.
Okay.
Obviously, you shouldn't have to go through this just to get your title.
All right. I also want to mention that when I moved here from Detroit to Florida, I brought my truck with me.
Oh, gosh.
And they ended up having to inspect my truck and checking it out to make certain all the numbers match my title.
Right.
And all the other stuff to go with it. And then I ended up having to pay Blue Book value in taxes of what the truck was worth. I had to pay taxes to the state of Florida.
I'll tell you honestly, I don't know anything about how that works. I do know that when a vehicle is transferred, sometimes, for example, you're my brother, and I decide I'm going to sell my truck to you for $1, and you want to go register the vehicle. They're not going to tax you on the sale price of $1. They're not going to buy that. They're going to look at the reasonable value of the vehicle and assess taxes based upon that. And so I suspect something along those lines happened, and they were looking at the reasonable value of the vehicle. Right. But I don't know, obviously.
I was saying that they charged me basically sales tax on that vehicle in Florida. They said, yeah, you paid it in Michigan, but you didn't pay it in Florida. You got to pay it here.
Well, if that's the case, again, it just doesn't sound legal, honestly.
Well, I know there was a big argument about it, but I never got no money back. All righty, and I thank you, and I thank you for your
All right. Thank you very much. We have John on line 3, and John, literally, I got about 60 seconds.
2 minutes.
Yes, I see that on the clock. I'll be quick.
Sure.
Back in the late 60s, early 70s, I used to go to Faneuil Hall in Boston. They had debates, and Dershowitz was there and others. It was very, very interesting. But I wanted to tell you a quick, amusing story.
Sure.
I drove cab for 1 year, and I lived just right outside of Boston. And a fella got in the cab, and I went to his house, and he got in the cab, and he said, I was in a car accident, take me to my doctor. And
I got a 60-second warning here.
I took him, and I waited, and then he got in the cab, and I took him to his lawyer. And when he came out of the lawyer's office, he had a neck brace and a cane, and I swear it's the absolute truth. I called my brother, and I told him. He said, well, the lawyer's equipped to practice.
Yeah, well, yeah,
that was in the mid-'60s.
And it's not surprising. That's one of those, personal injury attorneys that sometimes give personal injury attorneys a bad name.
I enjoy your program.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I know.
Bye-bye. Anyway, I guess in the last 30 seconds, folks, I'll just say thank you for the calls. I really do appreciate you listening. This has been Ask a Lawyer, WPSL. Until next week, feel free to give my office a call at 781-8003, or we'll talk here next week. Thank you very much.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.